For today's presentation, we have Will and Barbara that will be sharing with us today. And before I introduce them, I'd like to let you know that today's presentation will be featured on Zoom in live captioning as well as on the Facebook Live. And it will be recorded, and at the end of the month it will be put on YouTube. So once again, we thank you so much for joining us. And for some housekeeping things, we have in the bottom there is a chat so that you can put in, or a Q&A section. Please put in your questions. We'll be taking questions throughout. And I think with that, we'll just go ahead and start. And I think we will start with you, Barb.
Greetings from Fairbanks. It's a beautiful day outside. I could see the tree right outside with the blackberries changing colors. I'm not sure if we're all ready for snow after this liquid sunshine summer. But, you know, we learn to live with what's around us. My English name is Barbara Franks. My Tlingit name is Neech Claw, which means mother of the shoreline. I follow my mother's line as a Raven Coho, and out of respect, I remember my dad as he's an eagle wolf. I'm here today because of the loss of my son, Ron David Whitcraft II. He was my youngest son. He died December 14th, 1997, and I could remember that day like it happened yesterday. In 1997, there wasn't an 800 number that you could call. There weren't any books that you could look at. And you know, a lot of the agencies may have known about suicide, but that stigma and that taboo that is attached to suicide is sunk in cement. It's just ground in there. I found a document a long time ago that when people were talking about the Tlingit perspectives of suicide in the community, and just a little part I want to share with you. We were taught as youngsters in dealing with others, our life is like walking and carrying a full bucket of water. Every time we make a mistake in our lives, some of that water spills out. What happens when the bucket becomes empty? And your mind goes blank thinking. I remember that day like it happened yesterday because, you know, 2 days later, my husband of 25 years lost his battle to cancer. Mm-hmm. So when we look at someone that we're trying to look to lean on, to talk about, to discuss and everything, he was not there. But I have to tell you, I'm glad that he was in a coma when I found out about our son. And I had every piece of phone, everything taken out of the room. He was at the Cancer Treatment Center in Tulsa. And I didn't, because I know that, or I heard that people in a coma can hear things. I didn't want those to be the last words, that we lost our son to suicide. So coming back, you know, I was, you know, people always say that you're in a fog. Well, I felt like I was in a fog for 3 months. Someone told me I did a commercial with them about how to deal with suicide, and I don't remember that. They showed me a copy of that little video clip and everything, and I don't remember that. I'm glad I was by myself. You know, I did a story for the Juneau Empire one time, and it was, here I am. We had a family of 4. And then my son died, my husband died. And my remaining son, it was too unbearable for him to be around Juna because he and his brother did everything together. And then there was just me. So, when I think about being quarantined here in Fairbanks by myself, and it doesn't bother me because I think I was prepared for it a long time ago. You know, it got to a point where, I said, where are all my friends? Where are all my family? And later on, when I started reading books, and, I have to tell you, I said, I kind of giggle when I go into a bookstore because I have a beeline and there's probably a path there that said, oh, we know where Barb's going, because that's in the self-help book. Whoever categorized that row of books, the self-help book, is that no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what, and that's the thing about it, it's just, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to share with you what worked for me. Because if you tell something to do, says, I'm going to tell you one more time, and the kids don't do it, right? Well, I would like to share with you what worked for me. And so I read about books of loss, not just of suicide, but in a car wreck, and domestic violence and sexual assault. I read about drinking alcohol, because those are losses. Those are losses that some people call now secondary loss. So it was, when I read about how they dealt with, what am I going to do to pick myself up from where I'm at? I remember waking up one time. I get emotional when I share this part, but it's important. I woke up, and when I opened up my eyes were facing the ceiling. I still was dressed, and I had my coat on, and my purse was wrapped around my hand. I had gone out the night before, and I reeked of beer. That's when you could still smoke in the bars and everything, And I said, Barb, what are you doing? I could hear my mom say, you weren't brought up that way. So when I started going more and more to that self-help book of how people pick themselves up, I learned, and I made, I always say, I talk to you about the weather outside, about how the trees are changing, but I needed to make that change myself. I needed to turn my life around. I would say change is in the wind, and that's what we need to lean on. So I changed my surroundings. If you came into my home, there wasn't an empty space of pictures, of puzzles we put together. I had pictures lining the wall of when they were kindergarten to when they graduated. So I said, why am I staying away from home? How come I don't want to go home? It's because those were reminders. So I ended up taking the pictures out, and I put them in a box. My intention was to put them in an album. So I started buying things that I liked. I like buying art. I like buying the Tlingit art. And so I started filling my wall with that, things that made me happy. I bought a new couch cover for the couch, So those were things that helped me. It's not because I'm not thinking about them anymore or that they're not in my mind, but I needed to change things for me. That was my self-help. So I was glad that, I was brought up in a culture that is so strong. When we had the coup 2 years after, my mom had a young man that took my son's Tlingit name. She had another young man that he became my tribal husband. He was given my husband's name. And I know they'll never replace my son or my husband, but to me, that name still goes on. That's what kept me going. Because, even that was not in a self help book, but it was the culture and the heritage that I was able to lean on that made me stronger because they survived without the resources that we have today. And I said, oh my gosh, if you knew how lucky you are to have those resources, to have those people to help you, to have it on your speed dial, you know, and to have someone even on Facebook that you could do FaceTime with, and they see the tears that are coming down. I liked when, the opposite tribe was there to help me, and they were there with their regalia and their blanket, and they were there to stop the tears before it hit the ground. I like those values that my parents instilled in me because that helped me. Someone asked me, they said, how long does it take to heal? I said, there are some things, this morning, I said, okay, today is going to be Remember My Sunday. So I woke up and I made fried rice, breakfast fried rice. It was his favorite, and later on, I'm going to be making chicken. And that was his favorite too. I got this cookbook. It said 150 ways to cook chicken. And he said, Ma, can't you just throw some flour on it and bake it? I'm not ready to have cranberries in my chicken. I'm not ready to have all these healthy stuff. I just want chicken, So today, in my healing day of remembering him, I'm just going to have chicken and rice. But, there were a lot of places that didn't have the title of suicide prevention. There wasn't even places, jobs that had money. But I'm glad that the monies came out. I'm glad that the monies came into the organizations in our regional because we need to take care of our own and what we're accustomed to and how we talk, how we present it. There was a lot of money that went out there for training. And, some people, because they're not ready to be a trainer, they were forced to be a trainer because that was the job they fell into. So I always said, can't we get people out there who want to do that? There's an organization out there called Encore. And if I go to the self-help book and everything, and I look at that book and everything, and if I open it up and I see one paragraph and it just bounces out at me, and I says, I'm going to get this book. But in this book, it had a little box. And in the middle of this box, part of the page, it said, I used to be somebody. At 66 years old, I could relate to that now because I used to be traveling. I was looking at the memories that pop up on your Facebook. In the last 10 years, I was somewhere doing a workshop. I was in a booth. I was in a walk. I was at a conference. I was doing a workshop or something. So when I think about I used to be somebody, there are people out there who are still compassionate, who still want to be part of the healing journey. Use them. They have the time to do the workshops, to do the trainings. I love the intervention models that we have. I started off with QPR that you had a presentation here a couple of days ago. I like Eric Boyer when he brings out the gatekeeper training. I started myself off with that. I used to be a master trainer with Safe Talk and Assist, and I took Survivor Voices. I met a lady at a conference and we were at a booth. I shared with you today that my son died by suicide, but with Survivor Voices, I didn't have to share with you how he died because that would activate my mental thought process, and it would shock the audience as well. I don't want to do that. I want you to know that I'm here today. December 14th will be 23 years since he died. And he was 23 years old when he died. I went to a healing conference, and in the healing conference in Seattle, it was so beautiful. They had 23 floors, and I had like a name tag. I said, okay, here's a name tag that says my son was a male. There's another name tag that said he was Alaskan Native. Another one that said how he died. Another one was his age group. So when I looked at the menu in the book of what could help me, there was a section of a floor dedicated to a male, to Alaskan Native, to the age group, and how he died. And everyone in that room already knew that we were in that category. So we just start off and say, what could we do to heal? And that was like 5 years after he had died. And I sat next to someone that he said, my son died 15 years ago. And I, oh, God. You know, and I was in awe. Wow, he's still going to a healing conference. And that's when it came to me that your healing has a journey of its own. It's not a checklist. It's not saying, okay, I grieved, you know, I was depressed for 2 months, you know, I'm now starting to eat. It didn't work that way. If it did, we all would be doing better yesterday, right? But, you know, it's kind of difficult to know who to talk to. But when I said I read all the books and I was wondering why my friends were going the other direction, they were turning around, they were going across the street, I read that, and they shared with me later on that I didn't know what to say. I finally shared with them through presentations like this is that you don't need to know what to say. All I need to know is that you're an arm's length away. And if I fall down, you'll be there to pick me up. That's all I need. We could sit there for hours, you know. But, you know, that is so healing in itself to have someone say, I'm right next to you. I'm with you in spirit. You know, I went to a conference one time, and we went on a walk, and it was in Phoenix, and this Alaska girl was so hot. 6 o'clock in the morning, you're already looking at 65 degrees, you know, and I'm glad that they had the walk in the morning. But I ended up with a lady, and so we kind of adopted each other, you know, and we were walking. There's, you know, you go a mile down there, you know, there's going to be a tree, and it has a turnaround sign and everything, you know, and then you come back. While we were going there, I saw a name on this one tree, and it had a ribbon, and I said, wow, somebody came ahead of time, and they put their name, their loved one's name on the cement with the colored chalk. I thought that was so cool. Anyway, the song came to me. It says, you are my sunshine. So while we were going to the tree, some of us were singing that, you know, and I sing alto, so it sounded like I had a few beers already. Anyway, so a lot of people were joining in and everything. You are my sunshine. And I said, this is for the loved ones that we lost to suicide. Boom. Then everybody else started singing it. And we went to the tree, and we turned around, and I started singing it again. And I yelled out, this song is for the ones that are still here. Because I wanted my son to know that not only did he lose his brother, but his dad, but that I was going to be here for him. He needed to know that. So as my life has been dedicated with suicide awareness, I wanted him to know that I love him more than life itself. But the work that I do, I think I'm more busy now being retired than I was when I was working, because I have that ability to decide what I want to do and where I want to do it and how I want to do it. I don't know if you can see my face now, but there was a time where, Dr. Gabor Mate, he has a beautiful book out there, When Your Body Says No. And when I saw him at a conference and everything, I just collapsed right in front of him, and I said, I think you were talking about me. And he says, no, sweetheart. He says, I'm talking about everybody. They just added to this book that ensured me that it was the right thing to do. Because sometimes, somebody will say, well, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm okay. Just shake it off and everything. But when you go home, you're crying. How come I didn't tell him that I was hurting today? The holidays are around the corner. How could you celebrate? Don't you know I'm still grieving? So I finally had to change things around again. It was Thanksgiving, and I was living in Marine View in Juneau. And I know that cancer patients, they don't like the smell of a cooking turkey, even though they could eat the whole thing. Yeah, but they just didn't like that smell. It was a murky smell that they had because of the drugs that they were taking. Anyway, so I put a sign up and I said, if you want me to cook your turkey, I'll be glad to cook it in my apartment. So that year I ended up with 12 drumsticks. I said, oh, here, I want to thank you for cooking our turkey. But see, I wasn't feeling sorry for myself because I was by myself. I was doing something because I was helping someone celebrate their Thanksgiving. So, when I said, how could we do this? How could we make things better? We're not going to make it better. All we're going to do, and what's going to be shared later, is what to do after the suicide. I remember people giving me information and everything, saying, well, this is what you should do and everything. And I finally adopted into my helping people. If I send them a card of condolence, I had a little note on there that I wrote. I said, when you're ready, I'd be glad to talk with you. I read this and I thought it was so cool when I was talking to fifth graders. I wrote down on the chalkboard, listen and silent. And this young girl, fifth grader, she raises her hand, Mrs. Franks, Mrs. Franks. Listen and silent use the same letters of the alphabet. And I said, I was glad you pointed that out because that's why I wrote those two down. I said, sometimes, even though we don't know what to say, sometimes it's good just to sit back and to listen to our loved one. And the young girl said, well, I have a sister that she just doesn't keep quiet. But maybe today I'll just sit back and listen to her. And I thought that was so cute because she's already incorporating something into her life to change with her sister. But sometimes I don't know what to say, but I will tell my friends and my family that I'll be right next to you. I'll be there to pick you up. God bless you. I do have a poem, but I think we're going to save that until the closing. All right.
Okay. Barbara, thank you for sharing your healing process with us and understanding that it's a very personal process and that the biggest thing that we can do is to be there when you're ready. And recognizing, I think that it's nice to know what's available, but again, capturing that what works for you and that it's a very personal process, and knowing how to respond as individuals, or, you know, and there's outreach to individuals such as yourself or to different agencies, but being aware in our time of need when we're ready. So I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I'd also like to thank you, Barbara, for your many years of service and helping to pioneer talking about and destigmatizing suicide in Alaska. It's been a hard journey and a journey of love, and we still hear that strength in your voice, and you're an encouragement to the rest of us as well. Thank you. Good speech. So I think from here we've got Will, who has an awful lot to say to us about Postvention, and Will, we appreciate the work that you do also very, very much.
Chish, and I wanted to start by just saying Chish to Barbara. I really think your story captures exactly what Postvention is about. It's about being there for people and holding that space. And the part that resonated, I think, the most is that often there aren't the right words, but I think being there is just so incredibly important. And I just wanted to say thank you, Chish, for sharing your story.
Thank you.
It's good to see all of you. Thank you for being here. Will My name is Will, and I work for Tribal Family and Youth Services. And part of my job is working on the Suicide Prevention Postvention Committee. And basically what that means is that we respond and support families when they lose a loved one to suicide. And I'm going to share a short presentation about sort of what Postvention is and sort of how Tribal Family and Youth Services became a part of this work. Okay, let's start. So this is a part of Tribal Family and Youth Services Department, which is at Central Council in Tlingit and Haida. And today we're going to be talking about Postvention. And I sort of want to start with the 10,000 foot view of what we do. And essentially at TFYS, we are there for families when they need a little extra help. Life is pretty hard, and I think it's a little easier when there's someone there with you. And this is our mission. And I think it's really important to sort of start with the values and the reason why we do these things. And this is why we are in the work that we do. And it's always starting from the values. 2005, there was an elders council convened by Tribal Family and Youth Services and the tribe that identified the values of Tlingit and Haida and Tsimshian peoples in Southeast Alaska. And I think this really frames and guides everything that we do. And when we're looking at Postvention and really social services in general, it's really focusing on hold each other up, that we're there for each other. And I think whenever we're talking about anything we do, it's always important to sort of start out, what are the values that are guiding us? And all of these are important, but I really think holding each other up and being there for each other is sort of at our most simple form of what we are doing. I'm one of a pretty large team. And as you can see, this is sort of the large model of Tribal Family and Youth Services. And suicide postvention is part of the wellness promotion right up here at the top. And a lot of our department works in child welfare and with elders, and we're all over the region in Juneau and in other villages, and that this really is a team effort in making sure that we're there for families. And so this is just sort of the overview of our program, and that postvention is a part of holding each other up. And these are some quotes that I just found that I thought really explained what we do. That it's about making people feel like they aren't alone, that they can be proud of who they are, and that they are strong enough, that what you need is within you. And these are just a few interviews, and I love especially this last one. I find motivation from people I look up to by reminding myself who I am. I am Kiksati, I am Tlingit, I can do this. And by looking at these responses to our surveys, it reminds me of why we do what we do. It's about helping people be healthier and sort of embracing who they are. And this is another part of our program where we bring elders into the school and enrich the learning that we're doing And it's, again, it's about this journey of learning who you are and sort of your own strength. And here's some more that people have explained. What does strength mean to them? And it's not just about how much you can lift or how strong you are, but it's about, I think, what Barbara was talking about being a good friend and being there for people. And I really want that to sort of be the focus of what we're talking about here today when we get to our Postvention presentation. And these last couple questions were actually from our little kid group, and it's, you know, we're dealing with some pretty complex stressors, all of us. And this is actually a survey that was before the COVID-19. And so this young person really identified that there's a lot going on, that within the family is stressful and society, and that they're taking in a lot of what is happening in our world, and it's stressful. And so postvention is a word I had never heard of before I became a social worker. And basically it's just support for individuals and families that have lost a loved one to suicide. And it's not this complicated thing. It's being there for people when they need it. And ways, what it can look like, it can be a support group, it can be counseling. It can also be more informal, like a check-in. You send a letter, a call, showing up, just making sure people are okay. And again, it's about going back to those values. And I think really what postvention is about is holding each other up. In Juneau, the postvention response team is part of the Juneau Suicide Prevention Coalition. And what's really awesome about this process is that it's a partnership from the whole city. That, you know, when we have to convene, it's really sad. It's because we've lost someone to suicide. And one of the things that has been heartening is that it's been a team effort to make sure that people are okay and have the support they need. And so this work we could never do alone. And I just want to say, gonna cheesh to the many partners that make this happen. NAMI, the Alaska Memorial Mortuary, the police department, JYS, JAMI, Juneau School District, and also others at Central Council, Clinton Haida, make this work possible so that we can be there for families. And in sort of a more general structure, we meet quarterly to make sure that our plan is working and that our processes are what we want them to look like so that we're prepared when something happens. And then we also meet as needed to respond to suicides and to make sure families and community members have the support they need. This is hard work and sad work. It's something that we don't want to happen, and we hope we can prevent entirely. But when it does, we want to make sure that we're there for people when they need it. And this is more words than I typically would want in a presentation, but I really wanted to drill in to what our process looks like to sort of illustrate, okay, so when something happens, what do we do? And so when someone on the committee learns there's a suicide, and often this is through the police department or through the mortuary, we send out an email and talk among the team to see if we need to meet to sort of identify who may have been affected and the logistics of providing support. In that first meeting, we really want to make sure that we know all the factual information, that when a suicide happens, often there can be information that's wrong or things that are conveyed that may not be true. And so we want to make sure that the facts are conveyed. We also really want to map out who in the community could be affected by this. We want to make sure all friends, all family, all people who are connected and may work with this human being have the support they need. And then we look at ourselves and say, okay, who would be best to connect with this family or with this individual? We really want to build off of existing relationships that we have in the community. Because I think when people are dealing with grief that is as profound as this, we want it to be a familiar person. We don't want it to be a cold call, but someone that they can trust and that has that rapport already. And so we reach out, and as I said before, postvention can look a lot different depending on the situation. And so for some people, they may want professional counseling. Others may just need someone to be with them. Others may need a support group. And so we work with the family to make sure that those resources are available. We also make sure that people have a physical packet that sort of details all of this stuff that we have, because again, this can be a really hard time. And as you all know, our memory and ability to process can be really impacted by a trauma like this. And so we want to also make sure that all of this is in writing, as well as something that's conveyed by conversation. And so we give out packets as well to make sure that people have the information and the care they need. And again, we aren't just there once. We make sure that we check in repeatedly, because trauma is complex and you may not process it immediately. And so we want to make sure that when you do process it, you're not alone. And so in this meeting, we determine sort of the short-term goals, but also the long-term. We want to make sure that people have the support they need, access to resources, and at the sort of beginning, it's about crisis management, that people don't feel like they're alone. And longer term, it's about having access to counseling and sort of those longer term services that really help us navigate these feelings that are really hard. And people can respond in a lot of different ways. And we want to make sure that people have the tools and the resources that they need to do that. And in those survivor packets, we have different resources that are meant for different populations. So we want to make sure that adults and children and men and women and all people have sort of the resources that are relevant to them. And so on this slide are those that are available. And then I think another equally important part of Postvention, it's not just about how we respond to the family or community members, but it's also sort of how does the media portray what is going on? How does the radio, the newspaper, and how do we talk to our neighbors about this? And so I think it's really important that we think about our language that we're using when we talk about suicide, that it's important that we portray it. It's not inevitable, that there is help seeking and information available for help. There are warning signs and protective factors and effective treatments. There are many tools, many resources, and you're not alone. People have had really hard things happen to them for a long time. And I like the way that Barbara said it, is that, these are some skills that work for me. And so that's the kind of thing that we do as a Postvention team. That's the kind of thing that you work on in counseling, is what are different skills that could work for you? What has worked for others? And that suicide is not inevitable. It doesn't have to happen. And so I think it's really important to know that you're not alone and that there are things that work. And I think it's also important that we also make sure that there are things that we shouldn't convey when we're talking about suicide. We want to make sure that we're not romanticizing it or making it seem natural, or that it's something that is inevitable or unexplainable. It's all of those things. It's complicated, but there are things that work in preventing it. You're not alone. And I just want to say that it can be really hard when you're in that dark place, but that, you can get through this when you're with people, and that when you have those resources and work on those skills to navigate really, really tough things that come through life. And so I wanted to end by sort of focusing on discrete resources that we have access to in our community. So some of the books that we give out in our packets, and also ones that you yourself could get if you want, are those listed here. And then I have 2 websites that are part of the Juneau Suicide Prevention Coalition that are really, really good at showing all of the resources here in Juneau, the clinicians and counselors that are available, the different support groups in town, that the 2 websites, juneausuicideprevention.org and juneaumentalhealth.org, which I should explain are actually the same website, which is pretty awesome. But, it's so that it is expanding that net when people Google it. We want to make sure that people are getting the resources they need. If you are facing an emergency of yourself, if you're having suicidal thoughts or a friend, the Alaska Care Line is an incredible resource in that emergency context. And that number is right here, 1-877-266-4357. And there's also a text option now, which is pretty amazing. It's 741-741. So if you don't feel comfortable talking on the phone yet, the text service is pretty awesome too. And then finally, there's a toolkit for schools from the sprc.org that's also pretty amazing if you're an educator and you're looking for resources that you can use in the education setting. So that's my presentation, and I really wanted to reiterate that there's a lot of resources out there, and we are here to help. And so if you need something, please reach out. And Gunapchish for listening.
Thank you, Will. That was wonderful. A lot of information there. And one of the things that I wanted to add to that is that there is a Careline app. And so I believe the way that I found it, we're getting more literature on that, but I believe that you can just look in your apps and type in Careline, Careline app, and download it. Of course, it's free, but it's worth a look. There's quite a lot of information there should you need it for yourself or for another. So I appreciate that. That was put in our comments, and a wealth of information. So we will be sharing a lot of what Will shared with us. We will be putting that on our Facebook page, JSPC, so that you can have access to that as well. And then, Barbara, we had another question for you that came in from one of our listeners. And so in recognizing that there were so many wonderful things that helped you, the question follows is, what would you recommend to someone who is newly addressing their grief over the loss of a loved one to suicide? What would you recommend?
That's different for everyone as well. What I was glad that in our Clinky culture that we had the opposite tribe come and monitor being with me and who came to see me. Just like a cancer patient, you never go and talk to the doctor by yourself because you're not going to hear anything that the doctor says after they told you you have cancer. So I adopted that into when I talk to someone. I says, let your friend know, to let the family members know that it's okay to come and visit, to come and talk, and that's why people stay away. It says, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to hear what you have to say. I'm still trying to learn how to get up in the morning by myself. So that's why, with my self-help, I would let people, I would call them and I said, oh, I was thinking about you today. And they were saying, wow, and that was to let them know that I'm okay now to talk. I'm now okay to visit. I'm now okay to sit down and have lunch with you. So as a newly grieved person, that I had to give myself time to even think about what I was going to do next. But, it's always a common courtesy thing on both sides to give that space that they need. Because I remember being in that fog. I don't know what you said to me, and I apologize.
That's beautiful advice. Thank you, Barbara. It kind of brings me to another point too, that there is training that's available on knowing how to show up for our loved ones and how to recognize suicide, how to signs of suicide rather, and how to be supportive. So our viewers, I want to remind you that, again, you can contact JSPC and have specific training either for your family, for your group of friends, for your organization, whatever it is that you need. This JSPC is here for you and whatever our community needs. So I just want to thank you for that. And I want to invite everybody, as we listen to the poem that Barbara has from us, to be sure to put in all of your comments and your questions. So Barbara, if you want to go ahead and read us the poem that you have for us, we'll just give people a minute to post their questions.
Okay, thank you. Before I read my poem, I wanted to thank Will for putting up the 1-800 number on there, and to let people know that in 2019, 2.2 million people called the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. And even though I refer to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number more than I do with the Alaska number is to let people know that in the bigger picture, we're not alone. It's not just our village. It's not just our region or our state. We recognized World Suicide Awareness Day on September 10th. You know, and so we are not alone. And the one thing, you know, that people ask me, said, you know, why did he die by suicide? And with the fifth graders, I say, he took those reasons with him. If I was trying to figure out what went wrong, what did I do? That guilt that just steamed. And in the fifth graders, I said, okay, your sister got mad at you. Your mom got mad because you hit your sister, you know, and then you go to school and you forgot your lunch on top of there, and all these things are piling up, even as a fifth grader. And at the end of the day, you're like a volcano. And all these things are coming down at the same time. Which one are you going to take care of first? Right, so when I say he took those reasons with him, even as a mother, as close as I was to him, that was also the change that I had to incorporate in my life, that he took those reasons with him, and to remember all the beautiful things that he left me with to lean on today. So I wrote this poem on January 25th, 2011. To get the kind of picture, I stood on the corner of a street asking people if they could spare 5 minutes. No one stopped. No one looked at me. My regalia kept me warm from the cold elements of the winter storm. My heart sank lower than the surface of the solid ground beneath my feet. The time we live in today is fast and furious. No one wants to get involved anymore, and it takes too much time, and they have better things to do. What is the story behind the suicide we heard about last night? Was that person asking for 5 minutes? What did you do with your 5 minutes you did not share with someone else? So what did I do to change this picture around? I called someone and said, I thought about you today. And the ice around me began to melt. My heart soared like the eagle that just finished feeding the babies in the nest. Or maybe that feeling you get when you tell someone, I'm sorry. Yes, that kind of feeling that makes you hand out 5 minutes to everybody. It makes you want to do good things over and over again. Amazing. Put your hand out there and keep it there, because there was someone at the other end of that hand, desperately reaching out for help. Grab onto it, hold onto it, and bring him into safety. Can you spare 5 minutes? When I was by myself and I was crying myself to sleep, and I sometimes would go downtown and I would watch the big trucks going by and everything, and I wait for a big truck to go by and I would scream, as loud as I could, but I had to let it go. I had to let it go because it was tearing me apart inside. All I wanted was 5 minutes. In my Tlingit name, it means Mother of the Shoreline. And Lily White from Huna, she says, your Tlingit name means Mother of the Shoreline. It means that when the tide comes in, all these people will be coming in to talk to you. But don't get too close to them, because the tide's going to come in again and then it's going to go out. They only needed to meet you for that reason. I don't know when I was chosen to do this, but I know what I read and what I heard and what helped me was too important not to share. Sheesh.
Good Chish.
Thank you.
Tina, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Barbara, thank you for sharing that with us. It just speaks volumes. 5 minutes to share, and that's a community that we want to build here. And in that, I want to say that there was one last question that came in, and so in recognition of the difficulty, after a suicide comes the funeral or the burials or the ceremony. What kind of support is there? What kind of support can we offer to the families that are going through this difficult time? If that's for either of you.
Go ahead, Will.
I would say that one amazing contact actually has been Darlene at Alaska Memorial Park and Mortuary. I would say that would be sort of the first place I would start. She's pretty amazing and great to work with in a really, really hard time. Suicide's really tough, and death in general is really tough, but I would say that would be a starting point on helping.
That was Darlene with who? The Alaska Mortuary?
Yes, the Alaska Memorial Park and Mortuary.
Okay.
And their office number is 907-277-1682.
And I want to add to that, for me, it was the website that I drowned myself in for information, and Dustin Morris and Dennis Lasley with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has a lot of resources that you could download for free. And it might give you a guideline of where you want to focus, how you could help, or when you could help, after the suicide, after the attempt, And so for me, it was really difficult. For me, also a really big step in getting a lot of the feelings out and everything was having a journal. And I have about 10 journals there, and they each have like maybe 1 or 2 pages in there, and I don't want to throw it away, because what I did was I wrote in a journal, and a couple days later I would tear it up and put it away. But what it helped for me was that I got those thoughts out, because the guilt starts coming out. What did I do? What couldn't I have done? And why do I feel this way today? But then the next day I'd have a different journal, and I would write in there, and I said, oh my gosh, I had breakfast fried rice today, and that just, brought a really good memory to me. So, as the waves are going around and everything with your emotions and stuff, that's what helped me change from one day to the next, And when I talk to young people that say, what could we do collectively? And, we like to sit around bonfires and tell stories and everything. And so that's when the journal comes in. You could each write a page of how that person was special to you. What impact did they make on your life? What do you want to do to help even their family members, like cut wood or, shovel the sidewalk or something like that. I'm doing this because, your son would have been here to do it for you. And so when you have the bonfire, nobody likes to share it in real life. So what you do is you get the journal piece of paper and you have a little bonfire, and you don't read it or anything, you just throw it in the fire. And to me, that's just like sending up a message to him or her that you're remembering them at that particular time. Because, our emotions, we are all told to be strong, but I know some days we don't want to be. But this is one way that I like to approach that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So unfortunately, we are at the end of our hour. I want to remind our viewers that this will be recorded and that we will have links on our website to share information. We had a last question come in of the name of the app, and that's Careline, Careline, Careline. And Barbara, once again, I want to thank you for sharing with us. Will, I want to thank you, both of you, Gunishish, for all of the work that you do. And the viewers, I want to thank you for listening with us as well, and let you know what we have coming tomorrow. We have Representative Sarah Hannon to talk with us about advocacy for mental health. And then we'll have also what is peer-to-peer and the benefits of peer-to-peer. We have some stories of recovery from our active duty veterans, whom we appreciate, and also traumatic acquired brain injuries. So we hope that you will continue to join us throughout this week and throughout the end of the month. And again, thank you all so very much. I appreciate your being with us today. Take your 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.